It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage.
Inside a giant underground tunnel network at Saqqara, Egypt, sit 24 massive stone boxes, each weighing up to 100 tons, cut from a single block of granite, one of the hardest stones on Earth. Even today, engineers with the most advanced technology, including diamond-tipped drills, would struggle to match the precision inside these boxes. Perfect angles, mirror-smooth surfaces. So how did the people who built this shape granite with this kind of accuracy, using nothing but copper tools and chisels? For decades, nobody had an answer. The official explanation never came close. Then archaeologists finally translated an inscription that had been sitting quietly in an archive for nearly a century. And what it revealed changes everything we thought we knew. These hieroglyphs reveal how they were actually cut and the machine that was used. The boxes. To understand why these boxes are so impossible, you need to understand granite itself. Granite is one of the hardest natural materials on Earth. It sits between 6 and 7 on the Mohs scale, the standard system scientists use to measure how hard a material is. Steel sits at around 4 to 4.5 on that same scale, which means granite is actually harder than steel. Even today, engineers can only cut through it using diamond-tipped machinery, because diamond is the hardest material known. And even with diamond tools, cutting granite is slow, loud, and expensive. Now look closer at what is inside these boxes. The interior corners are sharp, not rough, not approximately square. They are cut into perfect right angles in solid granite. To cut a sharp corner like that, a tool needs to fit inside that tight space and still cut with full power. No tool from ancient Egypt has ever been found that can do this, not one. Then there are the lids. Each lid weighs 27 tons. These were not simply placed on top of the boxes, they were fitted to them. The gap between each lid and its box is less than the width of a single human hair, running across the entire edge. Picture two surfaces, each weighing more than 20 tons, sealed together in solid granite with almost no gap at all. That level of precision would challenge even a modern fabrication workshop today. The floors inside these boxes are just as strange. Several show no tool marks anywhere. Not faint marks, not worn-down marks, nothing. The surface is so smooth it reflects light like a mirror. The only way to achieve that kind of finish today is with industrial polishing machines that run for hours. Nobody has ever explained how copper tools and sand could produce a finish like this. These are not crude storage boxes. They are precision-built objects, cut to tolerances that would push the limits of modern technology. And according to the official story, they were built by a civilization using nothing but copper chisels and stone hammers. One detail makes this even darker. In 1851, when French archaeologist Auguste Mariette first entered this tunnel, he found one box still sealed shut. Its lid was cemented down with mortar so fine it left no gaps at all. When his team finally broke the seal and opened it, the box was completely empty. It had not been robbed. It had not been disturbed. It had been sealed shut perfectly around nothing. Nobody has ever explained why. And there is something else Mariette recorded. After the first week of digging, several of his own workers refused to go back into certain parts of that tunnel. He never explained why. He only noted that they would not return. The boxes are still down there today. The questions are still unanswered. And after more than 100 years, the official explanation has never come close to solving any of it. The official explanation. For more than 100 years, mainstream Egyptology has given the same answer to how the ancient Egyptians cut granite. Copper chisels, stone hammers, abrasive sand. That is the official position. It is in the textbooks. It is on the museum placards. It is what every student learns. So let us take it seriously. Let us actually test it against the evidence, because that is something the official position has never done itself. Start with copper. Copper is a soft metal. On the Mohs hardness scale, copper sits at around 3. Granite sits between 6 and 7. In basic materials science, a softer material cannot cut a harder one. The softer material simply wears away and destroys itself. If you press a copper chisel against granite and strike it, the granite does not chip. The copper does. This is not a debatable point. It is physics. And yet this explanation has been accepted without a single full-scale test to prove it works. That is the most damaging fact about the official position. In over a century of mainstream Egyptology defending the copper chisel theory, nobody has ever attempted to cut a granite surface to the tolerances found inside the Serapeum boxes using copper tools and abrasive sand and actually succeeded. No controlled experiment, no replication study, no demonstration. The theory has never been proven, it has only been repeated. Now look at the abrasive. The official story says sand was used as the cutting material fed between the tool and the stone to grind through the granite. But the actual abrasive found inside the ancient drill holes at Aswan is not sand, it is corundum. Corundum is a mineral with a hardness of 9 on the Mohs scale. It is the same material used in modern industrial grinding discs. It is extremely effective at cutting through hard stone. And it does not occur naturally anywhere near Aswan or the Nile Valley in workable quantities. The nearest natural deposits are in the eastern desert and in parts of southern Africa, hundreds to over 1,000 miles away. Someone found it. Someone transported it across that distance. Someone processed it into a paste and used it deliberately at multiple quarry sites across Egypt. That is not primitive. That is an organized, large-scale industrial operation. The copper chisel theory cannot explain the sharp interior corners. It cannot explain the sub-millimeter lid seal. It cannot explain the mirror-grade floor finish. And it cannot explain why the abrasive found in the actual ancient drill holes is not sand at all, but a precision industrial mineral sourced from hundreds of miles away. The official explanation is not just insufficient. It has never been tested. It has never been demonstrated. And it is directly contradicted by every piece of physical evidence left behind in the stone. So if it was not copper chisels and sand, what does the stone actually show? Because when you look at the cuts under magnification, with calibrated scientific instruments, the evidence is specific, measurable, and deeply unsettling. The physical evidence. The cuts in these granite boxes are not just smooth. They carry a specific physical signature, and that signature tells you exactly what kind of process made them. This is not guesswork. This is engineering. Here is the most important finding. When any cutting tool touches granite, whether it is copper, iron, or even a modern diamond drill, the impact creates tiny cracks just below the surface, inside the crystal structure of the stone. These cracks are unavoidable. They are simply what happens when force meets stone. Every tool leaves them, every single one without exception. The Serapeum boxes have none. 0 cracks below any cut surface. The crystal structure underneath every cut is completely undamaged. The granite did not fracture below the cutting line. It separated cleanly at that exact boundary, as if the stone simply let go at that one point and left everything beneath it untouched. There is only one known process that can cut granite without leaving any cracks underneath. It is called ultrasonic cutting. In this process, a tool vibrates at a frequency above 20,000 cycles per second, far faster than any hand tool could ever move. At that speed, the vibration breaks the bonds between the stone's crystals so quickly and precisely that the granite separates cleanly, without cracking anything below the surface. The result is a clean, exact boundary, with no damage underneath. That is exactly what the Serapeum boxes show. Now look at the drill holes at Aswan, where ancient workers once cut blocks directly out of the quarry. In 1983, engineer Christopher Dunn measured the spiral groove left inside these holes. The groove cuts through the granite at a rate of about 1 millimeter per rotation. That number sounds small, but it is staggering. To cut through solid granite at that rate, you need a precise combination of rotational speed and downward pressure. When engineers calculate how much power that actually takes, the number is far beyond anything a human-powered tool could ever produce. A bow drill cannot do it. A weighted lever cannot do it. A counterweight system cannot do it. The groove in that stone points to a power source with no human-powered equivalent anywhere in the ancient world. Then there is the heat. Under high magnification, the cut surfaces of the serapeum boxes show a very specific pattern. The heat is concentrated at one single point of contact. It does not spread into the surrounding stone. When two surfaces rub against each other through friction, heat spreads across the whole area of contact. But when ultrasonic vibration strikes a surface in rapid micro-impacts, the heat stays locked at that one exact spot and disappears before it has time to spread. Pinpoint heat, not spread heat. That is exactly what the serapeum surfaces show. And this is not isolated to one site. The same four signatures, zero cracking beneath the surface, the 1 mm advance rate, the same abrasive material at the cutting edge, and pinpoint heat at the boundary, all appear again at the Valley Temple of Khafre in Giza, at the Abu Rawash quarry in the north, and at the inner sanctuary column bases at Karnak in the south. These sites sit hundreds of kilometers apart. They belong to different dynasties and different centuries, yet they all carry the exact same fingerprint. The same process was used across an entire civilization consistently for a length of time nobody can explain. One final detail makes this even stranger. Ultrasonic cutting at this frequency is completely silent to human ears. Anyone operating equipment like this would have felt its effects directly on their body, pressure building in their ears, a sense of disorientation, vibration moving through their soft tissue, all without hearing a single sound. They were cutting through solid granite in complete silence. 4 physical signatures, all pointing to the same process. But that process needs something to power it. And that is exactly where the ancient world runs out of answers. The word nobody can read. Now we leave the stone for a moment, because there is a document that describes exactly what was used to cut that granite. It is a text written in hieroglyphs, and the story of how this document was almost lost forever is just as dark as anything found inside that tunnel. The year is 1938. An Egyptian man named Selim Hassan is completing what will become his final survey season as an Egyptologist. Hassan was not an ordinary figure. He was Egypt's first native-born Egyptologist to hold a senior excavation position, a man who spent his entire life reading and translating the records of ancient Egypt. During this final season, he comes across a hieroglyphic panel. It is written in administrative script, the same plain, practical style of writing that Egyptian scribes used for quarry logs, ration records, and shipping documents. Not religious writing, not mythology. Administrative writing, the kind used to record real, practical, day-to-day operations. Hassan files a short note describing it as tool-related administrative text of uncertain classification. Then he moves on to other work. He never returns to it. He dies in 1961. His note sits inside the Cairo Museum archive for decades, completely untouched and unexamined. In 2017, an independent researcher going through related survey materials finds the panel and photographs it. The photograph is shared on a restricted engineering history forum. Within 72 hours, the entire thread is taken down, and the researcher's access to the archive is revoked. But by then, the photograph has already been copied and shared elsewhere. What that photograph reveals is a hieroglyphic text describing a cutting mechanism broken into 3 distinct parts. The first part describes the tool itself. It refers to a large rotating tube pressed against stone under controlled downward pressure. The hieroglyphic symbol used here is significant. It is the symbol Egyptians used for mechanisms that spin and rotate, not for ritual objects or decorative items, but for actual functioning machinery. The text also specifies that 2 operators were needed to run it, and includes a scale measurement that rules out the idea of this being any kind of handheld tool. The second part describes the abrasive material. It names a paste called shefet, mixed directly at the cutting site. This is the same corundum paste that was later found as physical residue in the drill holes at Aswan. In other words, The inscription and the physical evidence in the stone are describing the exact same material from two completely separate sources, thousands of years apart. The third part is where the inscription becomes something nobody has been able to fully translate. It describes the power source using a phrase that roughly translates to the perfect turning of the heavenly directive. But buried inside that phrase is one specific word, the word naming the exact type of power being used. And that word does not appear anywhere else in the entire Egyptian written record, not in religious texts, not in literary texts, not in any other administrative document ever discovered. One word, in one inscription, with no match anywhere else in 4,000 years of Egyptian writing. This matters more than it might first seem. Egyptian scribes were highly trained professionals, and their vocabulary stayed remarkably consistent across centuries. A word that appears only once in thousands of years of standardized writing is not simply rare. It is a break in the entire system. There are only two real explanations for it. Either the scribe invented a completely new word that nobody else ever used again, or the scribe borrowed a term from something far older, something that existed before Egyptian writing itself was ever formalized. Neither explanation is comfortable. 3 separate scholars have studied this untranslatable word. The first called it an unknown mechanism type and chose not to pursue it any further. The second identified it as a hapax, a term used in linguistics for a word that appears only once in an entire language's recorded history, making it impossible to confirm its meaning through comparison. The third, an Egyptologist at the Oriental Institute in Chicago, described it in a 2019 conference as a term from a vocabulary we simply do not have, not partially understood, not loosely translated. We do not have it at all. The power source in this inscription has a name, but that name belongs to a vocabulary that has left behind no other trace in the whole of human history. The power source. To understand why this power source is such a massive problem, you first need to understand what ultrasonic cutting actually demands. Ultrasonic cutting works by vibrating a tool faster than 20,000 times every second. To keep that going, you need 3 things working together: a power source strong enough to run without stopping, a device that locks that vibration to one exact steady frequency, and a transducer, the part that turns raw energy into precise mechanical vibration. Today we do this with electricity, a frequency generator, and something called a piezoelectric transducer. This is advanced technology, even by modern standards. And not one piece of it has ever turned up anywhere in the ancient world. No fragment, no leftover part, no drawing, no mention in any text. Not in Egypt, not in Mesopotamia, not in China, nowhere on Earth. Now think about what kind of power this would have taken to actually run. At Aswan, the drill holes show the cutting tool advancing through solid granite at 1 millimeter per rotation. To cut a single serapeum box at that rate, the machine needed hundreds of thousands of rotations, all at the exact same power, without slowing down or speeding up. And it had to do that across all 24 boxes. That is not a quick burst of energy. That is something running steadily for a long time, like a piece of industrial machinery. Then there is the abrasive. The corundum used in this process does not exist naturally anywhere near Aswan. The closest sources sit in the eastern desert and in parts of southern Africa, hundreds of miles away. Someone was moving this material across enormous distances, again and again across different sites, across different periods of Egyptian history. That takes planning. That takes organization. That takes resources nobody has ever accounted for. Now go back to the inscription. The power source is described using the word pet, which means sky. Not earth, not human strength, not anything we can point to on the ground. The ancient scribe pointed up. And here is where it gets stranger. Remember that pinpoint heat we found on the cut surfaces, concentrated tightly at one spot with no spread into the surrounding stone? That exact heat pattern is what modern directed energy cutting produces, including certain types of lasers. The inscription says sky, the heat pattern says directed energy. These two pieces of evidence have sat next to each other in the historical record for years, and nobody has ever put them together. One last detail makes this even more disturbing. When a piezoelectric transducer fails, it does not slow down first. It does not give any warning. 1 second it is running at full power, the next second it is completely dead. No transition, no decline, just silence. And that is exactly the kind of stop we see in the stone. Not at one location, but at every single precision granite site across Egypt, all stopping at once. The power stopped everywhere at the same time, and what it left behind tells the most painful part of this entire story. The day the machine stopped. Picture the granite quarry at Aswan sitting wide open under the desert sun. Still lying there, attached to the very bedrock it was being cut from, is the largest obelisk ancient Egypt ever attempted. It weighs 1,000 tons. It was never finished. It was never moved. And to this day, nobody has ever explained why. Look closely at the cuts along its surface. Right up to the very last moment of work, every cut is perfect. The same clean edges, the same complete lack of cracking beneath the surface, the same precision found at every other site we have already covered. There is no sign of decline anywhere near the point where the work stops. No worn-down tool marks, no shaky, weakening cuts from tired workers. The cutting was running at full power, right up until the second it simply was not running anymore. The official explanation says a crack appeared in the granite, and that is what forced the workers to abandon the project. But look at the cuts that continue past that crack. They are just as precise as everything that came before it. Whatever was doing the cutting kept working even after the crack appeared. So the crack is not what stopped it. Something else did. And whatever that was, it stopped the work instantly, and nobody ever came back to finish it. This is not an isolated case either. There are at least 3 other unfinished granite projects across Egypt, including an enormous unfinished statue at Aswan and several incomplete quarry extractions at other sites. Every single one of them shows this exact same pattern. Flawless precision, right up to one specific point, and then absolutely nothing. No slow decline, no final rushed attempt, just a hard, sudden stop, almost like someone reached over and turned the whole thing off. Now zoom out and look at the bigger pattern across Egyptian history. The oldest granite work is the best granite work. Not the newest, the oldest. The further back you go, all the way to the pre-dynastic period, before the first pharaohs, before written records, before any organized dynasties existed, the more precise the granite cutting becomes. And the further forward in time you move, the rougher and less accurate that same granite work gets. Think about how strange that actually is. Every other skill in ancient Egypt improved with time. Their metalwork got better. Their farming got better, their medicine got better, their architecture got better. Granite cutting is the one exception in the entire civilization. It started at its absolute best and got worse from there, generation after generation. The 4th dynasty, the era of Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, the kings behind the Great Pyramids, comes the closest to matching that original level of precision. But the dynasty right before it and the dynasty right after it both show a noticeable drop in quality. The 4th dynasty stands alone, like a brief moment when something extraordinary was still within reach, before it slipped away completely. This also means the temples most people associate with ancient Egypt, places like Karnak and Luxor, the ones filling every documentary and history book, were actually built long after this technology was already gone. In terms of granite cutting quality, those famous temples are some of the roughest examples in the entire historical record. The real masterpiece work is hidden underground, sealed inside silent boxes, in a tunnel where almost nobody is even allowed to take proper measurements. So here is the real takeaway. This technology did not slowly fade out. It was not gradually replaced by something better, the way old tools usually get phased out over time. It simply stopped. Everywhere, all at once, permanently. And that is not how technology naturally disappears. That is how something gets cut off. But the disappearance of this technology is only half the mystery. Because every single time someone got close to proving what the stone actually shows, Something happened to stop them. Buried on purpose. This is not one single conspiracy carried out by one group of people. This is 4 completely separate moments in history, spread across 3,000 years, carried out by 4 totally different kinds of authority. And every single one of them ends exactly the same way. The evidence disappears, the measurements never happen, the question never gets officially answered. The first moment happens around 1336 BCE, right after the death of the pharaoh Akhenaten. While he was alive, Akhenaten referenced a group of pre-dynastic builders the Egyptians called the Shemsu Hor, meaning the followers of Horus. He described their cutting technology in his own inscriptions, using language that closely matches the untranslatable word found in the KV-17 panel. The moment he died, the priests of Amun went through Egypt and chiseled his name off every monument they could find. And along with his name, every reference to that pre-dynastic construction knowledge disappeared too. These priests were not simply protecting their religion, they were protecting a version of history that could not survive contact with what those early builders had actually known. The second moment happens in 391 CE. A Christian bishop named Theophilus of Alexandria leads a mob to destroy the Serapeum of Alexandria, one of the greatest libraries in the ancient world. Among everything that burns that day are manuscripts catalogued under a very specific heading: Methods of the First Stonecutters. The catalog entry survived only because it had already been copied into a separate administrative record before the fire. The manuscripts themselves did not survive. Theophilus wrote about the destruction in his own letters, but never once mentioned what those manuscripts contained. A religious leader with no documented interest in engineering specifically chose to burn texts about ancient construction methods. The knowledge inside them is gone forever. All that remains is a single line in a catalog, proving they once existed. The third moment happens in 1817. Napoleon's 1798 expedition to Egypt produced a massive official publication called the Description de l'Égypte. In the first edition, printed in 1813, French engineers wrote about examining the interior surfaces of the Serapeum boxes at Saqqara. They described those surfaces as too precise for their own instruments to properly measure or explain. Remember, this was France at the height of the Enlightenment, the most scientifically advanced nation on Earth at that time, using the best instruments available anywhere, and the granite still defeated them. Then the second edition was printed in 1817, and that entire section was gone. Not corrected, not rewritten, simply removed. The page numbers are still listed in the index of the book today. The actual content behind those page numbers is gone. The fourth moment stretches from 2002 all the way to today. In 2005, engineer Christopher Dunn applied for permission to take precision surface measurements of the Serapeum boxes using calibrated industrial gauges, the kind of tool that simply rests gently against a surface to record a number. His application was denied within 6 weeks. The stated reason was risk of surface damage. But a gauge resting lightly on stone cannot damage stone. What it can do is produce a number, an exact measurement that would prove beyond any doubt that no known ancient tool could have created that surface. That number has still never been officially recorded. During that same period, at least 7 other requests to measure pre-dynastic granite structures using completely non-invasive methods were either denied or left sitting unanswered for years. Several of those requests came from university research teams with full academic credentials and absolutely no commercial interest in the sites. This was not a random pattern of bureaucratic delay. It was concentrated almost entirely on any request that could produce exact confirmed measurements of pre-dynastic granite work. In 2021, a French research team requested permission to perform a non-contact laser scan on a single empty box inside the Serapeum. No touching, no digging, just a beam of light. As of 2024, that request is still listed as under review. Back in 2019, a joint Egyptian and Japanese research team requested permission to use muon tomography on the Serapeum bedrock. a method that uses naturally occurring particles from space to image what lies underground, without touching a single surface. That request is also still sitting unanswered. The boxes are still sitting in that tunnel right now. The evidence is still sitting inside that stone. And every measurement that could finally confirm what it all means has either been denied, deleted, or left waiting in silence for years. 4 separate moments, 3,000 years apart, 4 completely different institutions. And every single time the exact same outcome. The stone is still there. The cuts are still there. The question has been sitting inside that granite for 4,000 years. And every time someone finally builds the right tool to answer it, someone else makes sure that tool never gets close enough to try.